hearts, we seek thee, through the Son, Amen. Come, Holy Ghost, fill the hearts of thy faithful, and kindle them the fire of thy divine love. And send forth thy Spirit, and they shall be created.
And now shall we this way.
Let's pray, O God, by the light of the Holy Ghost, has instructed the hearts of thy faithful. Grant us by the same Spirit to be truly wise, and ever to rejoice in his consolation. Through the same Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Sorrowful and Immaculate Mary.
Amen.
Saint Joseph. Saint Pius X. Saint John the Baptist. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So this encyclical, Was Primas, which is the first two words taken from the encyclical, is dealing with the social kingship of our Lord Jesus Christ. And who knows what the first Feast of Christ the King really was? Before 1925, what was the real Feast of Christ the King every year? When all, as was foretold by the prophet Isaiah, the dromedaries and the kings will come and bring gifts, and they will present him with the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What feast is that?
Christmas.
The Epiphany, right?
Epiphany.
The Epiphany. Epiphanos. That was always the Feast of Christ the King, because everyone saw all the nations and the kings come and adore Jesus Christ as God and as King. And it's only in the modern age that we have forgot the kingship of Christ. With the onslaught of the French Revolution, Protestantism, of course. So, as Bishop Williamson always used to give us the downslide from the High Middle Ages, 1517 was the Protestant Revolution, 1717 was the Masonic tearing off the crown of Christ the King at the public domain, the rise of Freemasonry, whose main goal is always to separate what from what?
Church from state.
Church from state, yes. The church is to the state. Church is to the state what the soul is to the body. And that's a quote directly from Pope Leo XIII. So, Pito, you separate your soul and body, what do you have?
Yeah.
What will happen to you if your soul and body separate?
Be dead.
Yes, you're dead. You separate church and state, it's death to a nation. It's death. Look at our poor country, just falling to pieces. Marriage is dragged through the mud. Our women are dragged through the mud, thanks to the advertisers and the men letting this happen in all the immodest fashions. And of course, all the horrible vices, abortion, contraception, and eugenics, genetics testing. And now Canada just recently has passed assisted suicide law. And then in Holland or in Netherlands, for children now they have passed. In Belgium they have passed assisted suicide laws for children. So a little kid who doesn't know what's up or down is suffering very much. I'd rather die. It's perverse, deeply perverse. So the church is to the state, what the soul is to the body. And the two must work together, obviously. So the Freemasons have always worked to separate the church and state. And then 1917, the throwing off of God with communism, the throwing off of Christ with Freemasonry, the throwing off of the Holy Catholic Church, the one ark of salvation, by Protestantism. So you see, it's a logical revolution from Protestantism, throwing off the church. I could go directly to God. I don't need sacraments. I don't need confession. I don't need the authority over me of the Pope and bishops. And this rebellion against the order that God established. And then logically it leads to throwing off Christ out of the constitutions of the state and the state laws. And of course, this really blew up at the French Revolutions. What year was the French Revolution? Anyone?
1789.
Yeah, 1789. That was a big deal. That was, and then our French Revolution was 1776, which was exactly the same Freemasons of the same lodges, and they were all buddies. Ben Franklin went often to France to meet with the lodges. And the lodges gave to George Washington, you can see it in Mount Vernon, a gift, which was the big key for the storming of the Bastille. It was a gift from the Freemasons to George Washington. And you can go to the Masonic Lodge in Alexandria, Virginia, and you can see a huge statue of George Washington with his Masonic apron. And on the walls they have letters in stone, marble stone, of his letters to the Masonic brethren. So the Freemasonry, nice men are not nice men. They're imbued with the idea that Christ must not reign. And equality to all religions. And as Pope Leo XIII says, indifferentism, which is, oh, any religion goes. You can be saved in any belief you want, just be nice. Indifferentism logically leads to what? Even worse.
Agnostic.
Brother, you should know this. Atheism. Atheism. Indifferentism leads to atheism. So it's either Christ the King or death. And that's why God has allowed the shaking of the whole revolution. We're down at the bottom of the trash can. And we're seeing everything just collapsing, right, all around us. Society, and now Obama's talking about martial law and the police state, which all the popes, including Leo XIII and Pius X, have warned about the police state. Because when you don't have the fear of hell to keep men from stealing and committing adultery and all these vices, when you don't have the fear of hell in us and the love of God, then you need incarceration, you need prisons, you need police force. As Joseph de Maistre said, it's a rational proportion. When monasteries grow, the need for prisons decreases. But as monasteries decrease, the need for prisons increase. So it's an inverse proportion. Why? Because when men love God and fear God in a healthy way and keep His laws and adore Jesus Christ as King and keep the Holy Catholic faith that He established, the fear of hell keeps men in check. And the prisons are much less needed because men have the sense of God and the grace through churches everywhere and the altars everywhere and people going to Mass and confession. But as the faith dwindles, the need for prisons increases. And look at where we are, where they can't even have enough buildings to put the delinquents of teenagers. It's a tragedy. So indifferentism leads to atheism. And indifferentism, throwing off Christ, the next step is to throw off God. And Nietzsche was one of those terrible German philosophers who proclaimed God is dead. God is dead. And then you can see there's a funny cartoon that shows the tomb of Nietzsche. And it says, Nietzsche said God is dead, Nietzsche. And on his tomb it says, Nietzsche is dead, God. So God has the last word. But the throwing off of God himself with the communist system. And when the Virgin Mary at Fatima the same year prophesied the spread of communism, it's not just gulags and barbed wire and tanks. The evil of communism is essentially what? The rejection of who? Of Christ the King and of God himself. Christ is God. So, yeah, the rejection of God. So the atheistic way of governing our politics, our economics, our whole social life, that's what Our Lady warned about. So let's face the facts. The United States and Canada and the West is far more communist in that sense, atheistic, than anything under Stalin. We have become truly a godless people. Just look at Sunday. Drive down the street on Sunday. God's law says don't work on Sunday. Is that respected by most people in our country? It's a joke. It's a complete joke. Businesses used to be closed down on Sunday, even in the United States. So God's laws are completely ignored, completely thrown off. And of course, the education in the schools, perverting the youngsters with public education. And the perversion just keeps going down and down and down. And now with this horrible transgender issue in North Carolina, with that governor standing up to these debased laws, and Target boycotted him, and all the media was attacking him just for standing on something based on common sense. We have fallen very low. But this is only 1917. This is only almost 100 years ago, 99 years ago. So, after throwing off God, what is there left to throw off? Where is God's law written? The law of God is written in everyone's heart and mind. This is called the natural law. This is called a conscience. So even now, I'm going to put the dates of Vatican II, 1962 to 65. You have the throwing off even of the natural law. And everything of the natural law is thrown off. So now we're here at 2016, and it's just ever accelerating in wickedness and evil and rebellion against God's law, against the natural law, against God himself, Jesus Christ the King, and the Catholic Church of tradition. So it's in this setting that 1925 Quas Primas is written. Because it's already shortly after Pope Pius X, and all over in Russia, in Ukraine, Stalin is moving his armies in. He's setting up gulags. And in Mexico, 1925, this is the beginning of the rumblings of the revolution in Mexico. And it's right in this time, a year after, President Calles will come into power. And he will unleash on the Catholic Church terrible persecution, the Freemasonic persecution on all of Mexico. And it's the same Pope, Pius XI, who will write another encyclical in 1926 or 27 about the persecution in Mexico. He will say how many youngsters and children and girls and boys stood before firing squads with their rosary in their hand, shouting, "Viva Cristo Rey," being put to death, and innumerable priests tortured and put to death and shot. So this is the setting of Quas Primas, 1925. Jesus Christ is uncrowned, the revolution is rolling full steam, and men have forgotten the solution to all the problems. And the American people are saying, well, it's Democrats are going to save us. And then the others are saying, no, Republicans are going to save us. And others are going to say, well, let's get back to our founding fathers. Let's get back to the true Constitution. But the problem is the Constitution is written without Christ the King. And that's not the solution. The solution is Jesus Christ the King. 1925, Pope Pius XI draws the whole human race back to that basic supernatural truth and reality. Without Jesus Christ, everything crumbles. Christ himself said, a house built on sand will fall when the storms come. And that's the modern governments. They're falling. But a house that's built on rock will withstand the storms. That rock is the Catholic faith and the kingship of Christ. So the little army we have here with our seminarians and our few priests and the few faithful, God doesn't depend on numbers. He can care less about numbers, really. But what matters is that we love the truth and we study the truth and fill our mind with Jesus Christ the King. Listen to these words of Michael Davies in his booklet here on Vatican II and the reign of Christ the King. He's talking about 1789, the rights of man. Okay, this is where all the problems, most of them come back to this time. Most of them. And then this was prepared by the revolution of the Protestantism and so forth. But the Declaration of the Rights of Man is the declaration of man's rights over God's rights. So how many of you have been praying at abortion clinics? And you talk to these girls and they say, well, it's my body. I can do what I want with it anyway. It's my right, right? And all these sodomites, they're promoting their perversion all in the name of my rights, correct? All these revolutions against Christ the King and these horrible laws being passed over the last 50 years in the United States and in the West, it's all in the name of the rights of who? The rights of man. Rights of man. So here's what he says. The rights of man were discussed by the French National Assembly during the meetings of August 1789 and adopted in October of the same year. Some of the articles are not simply acceptable, but actually commendable. Article 7, concerning the detention of citizens. Article 8, stating that laws cannot have a retroactive effect. And Article 9, concerning those who have been arrested, but whose guilt has not been proven. Other articles are ambiguous, but some others are positively incompatible with Catholicism. Particularly Article 6, which begins by stating that the law is the expression of the general will. The law is the expression of the general will. In other words, all authority comes from who? God or the people? The people, right? And that's a condemned error. The idea that all authority comes from the people. This is a complete negation of the teachings of the church that all authority comes from who? God. St. Paul says all authority comes from who? God. Pope Pius VI had no hesitation in condemning the Declaration of the Rights of Man as contrary to religion and to society. He condemned this Masonic document. And Father Dennis Fahey is going to say that 100 years later, they had a huge celebration in France. All the Freemasons came and celebrated the Declaration of the Rights of Man 100-year anniversary. And they boasted how they engineered its writing. The acceptance of the Declaration of the Rights of Man rules out the possibility of a Catholic state and the social reign of Christ the King. This is hardly surprising view of the Masonic origin of the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Father Dennis Fahey wrote, Father Dennis Fahey, another hero that you should all be familiar with. He was a Holy Ghost father. And he was taught by Father Lefloc, who was the same professor in the seminary of the French-speaking seminary in Rome. That was the seminary where Archbishop Lefebvre went. So 13 years before Archbishop Lefebvre was Father Dennis Fahey being taught the same doctrine of the kingship of Christ and the papal encyclicals. And when Archbishop Lefebvre came to the seminary, he said, I went there believing in separation of church and state. He was a liberal Catholic. He really believed in separation of church and state. And we Americans, of course, were raised on this thinking it's the greatest thing. But we realize when we discover what the church really teaches, that this is the recipe of a suicide of a nation, the separation of church and state. Just like separation of body and soul means death. So Father Lefloc taught Father Dennis Fahey, and he taught the great Archbishop Lefebvre before he was yanked out of there by the modernists in Rome, who were already like termites working their way, preparing for Vatican II. So Father Dennis Fahey says this, quote, that the preparation and the triumph of the French Revolution were the work of Freemasonry does not need proof, since the Masons themselves boast about it. Accordingly, the Declaration of the Rights of Man is a Masonic production. Is a Masonic production. And so what's going to happen after this encyclical is the martyrs in Mexico, the great martyrs in Spain, 1936 to 39, the great civil war in Spain, where a lot of Americans don't realize that a lot of American boys flew over to Spain to join the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. And a lot of Americans don't realize that the Abraham Lincoln Brigade was fighting with the communists against the Catholic state of Spain. And there was the great Catholic Carlistas and the Falange under the great Franco, who consecrated Spain to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And he is the only one in history to militarily defeat the communists, ever recorded. And Spain didn't come under communism. But what will happen in 1970, early 1970s, Pope Paul VI will impose the new Mass in Vatican II. And Franco will say, I don't want this Mass in my country. And Paul VI threatened to excommunicate him. And the bishops too, most of them didn't want it. But they caved in under false obedience. And so Vatican II will be the triumph of the French Revolution and the Communist Revolution within the church. And you can actually quote Cardinal Suenens. Cardinal Suenens called Vatican II the French Revolution inside the church. And then another cardinal called it the October Revolution within the church, which was the Communist Revolution in 1917. So Vatican II, as Archbishop Lefebvre called it, it was the greatest disaster in the history of the church. Now let me just read to you some proofs of this, all right? Just small proofs. This is the hymn, Aeterna Imago Altissimi, which is taken from the Divine Office for Christ the King. All right? Now, these words were deleted from the hymn for Matins and Lauds. Why would they delete these words that I'm going to read out to you very shortly? Why would they delete these words? Listen. To thee, it's singing to Christ the King. To thee who by right claim rule over all men, we willingly submit ourselves, be subject to thy laws. This means happiness for a state and its people. Glory be to thee, Jesus, supreme over all secular authorities. Supreme over all secular authorities. Oh, the liberals hate that. And glory be to the Father and the loving Spirit through endless ages. Those two verses deleted, because it really emphasizes Christ's kingship. Here's some more verses from the Vexilla Regis, which is the great Vesper hymn, which at the time of the French Revolution, the Vendée, the great Vendée in 1790s, those soldiers, when they had a victory over the Freemasons, they would fill the church and sing the Vexilla Regis by heart. It shows you that the church's prayers was in their blood, in their mind. It wasn't useless songs and advertisements filling their head. It was real, the spirit of the church. So here's 4 verses removed from this hymn. And ask yourself, why would they remove these from the hymn of Christ the King? Here it is, quote, Christ triumphantly unfurls his glorious banners everywhere. Come, nations of the world, and on bended knee acclaim the King of Kings. How great is the happiness of a country that rightly owns the rule of Christ and zealously carries out the commands God gave to men. The plighted word keeps marriage unbroken. The children grow up with virtue intact, and homes where purity is found abound also in the other virtues of home life. O beloved King, may the light from thee that we desire shine on us in all its glory. May the world receive the gift of peace, be subject to thee, and adore thee. Removed by Vatican II modernists. And this is just the outskirts of the damage. Remember that the Declaration on Religious Liberty, Dignitatis Humanae, was a direct attack against the kingship of Christ. And it's condemned over and over again by the church. The heresy of religious liberty understood in the council's sense, which is that the state should be neutral on matters of religion. So in the name of the document of Vatican II, Italy as a Catholic state, the Catholic Constitution was removed. Spain, removed. Italy, in 1964, removed. Ireland, removed. And in Colombia, it was Cardinal Castrillon Hoyos, who was the one to meet with Bishop Fillet, Bishop Williamson, and Bishop Tissier. And one of the bishops was missing at that meal. But this was the year 2000, when the nice and smiley modernist, Cardinal Castrillon Hoyos, got Bishop Fillet hooked. He got him hooked. And at that meal, he was saying how wonderful that all your Society of St. Pius X people are here on pilgrimage in Rome, and it's wonderful to see all this. Let's work together. Maybe we can work something out so that there can be peace. And so Bishop Fillet, who had already been playing with Grec and playing already, putting the society in grave danger, he really fell for it. And so this Cardinal Castrillon Hoyos, he was the prime instrument to remove the Catholic Constitution from the country of Colombia. And Colombia was 96% Catholic and practicing Catholic. And now for us, what does that really mean when you remove the Catholic Constitution from a country? What does that really mean? It means that all the Protestant sects and denominations, and all the Masonic lodges, and all the Mormons, and all these false religions start pouring into the country, building publicly their temples, going on radio, publishing their filth and their heresies and their errors. And what that means is the loss of morals, because remember, Protestants accept divorce. Protestants accept contraception. And then all the other vices that come with all this. So it means the collapse of a country. And so, quas primas is very important for us Catholics to come back to get our heads on straight as Catholics. And that the true lovers of a country are the Catholic people. Because we love our land and we want it subjected to Christ the King. And we love it so much that we have to oppose the errors that are destroying our country. And those errors are the false ideas of religious liberty, the false ideas of equality, false ideas of ecumenism, the false ideas on authority, that all authority comes from the people and not from God. And we Catholics have a lot of work to do. But at least we got to get the right ideas in our head. So, this encyclical, Quas Primas, would be rejected by the Vatican II. The doctrine of the kingship of Christ will be rejected by the bishops of the Catholic Church and the Pope. And for Bishop Follet to say that the religious liberty of the Council is very limited, and that, as he says in the Doctrinal Declaration of 2012, that the religious liberty of Vatican II is reconcilable with the Church's magisterium. These are extremely serious statements. It's called compromise. It's called compromising the Catholic faith. It's called compromising with the enemies of Jesus Christ against Jesus Christ. And turning the back on the social reign of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's very, very serious. And this is the heart of the fight. And that's why Our Lady of Mount Carmel, that's why the resistance priests throughout the world who are left standing, we are standing on these great principles of the Catholic Church. And the shoulders of Archbishop Lefebvre, who saw through all this nonsense. And it's a very serious thing when we have the 4 bishops consecrated by Archbishop Lefebvre, who have all in some way abandoned the fight for tradition. All of them. Either by silence and cowardice, either by playing games with the new Mass and saying it's okay to go to it if it fulfills your needs, or the new religion builds your faith, or that there can be no more structure, no more organization, no more vocations. That's just so contrary to the Catholic spirit and the missionary spirit of the apostles and of Christ the King. Even if the end of the world was tomorrow, we would still be laboring to save souls. Right? And then Bishop Follet, of course, signing the terrible Doctrinal Declaration, which everyone seems to forget today. That is the biggest awful thing that could happen. Everyone's afraid of the agreement with Rome, then I'll jump, then I'll do something. But the agreement of Rome that's nothing. The big, terrible thing was signing the Doctrinal Declaration, which compromises the Catholic faith and attacks the kingship of Jesus Christ. That's the big thing. But anyway, so let's take a look at the first paragraph of this encyclical. Quas primas. Venerable brethren, greetings and apostolic benediction. In the first encyclical letter, which we addressed at the beginning of our pontificate to the bishops of the Universal Church, we refer to the chief causes of the difficulties under which mankind was laboring. So he goes to the cause. When someone's sick, or you got a noise in your car, You want to find the cause. What's that clicking noise? And you lift the engine, you lift the hood, look at the engine. You want to find the cause. So Pius XI is going to get to the causes. And we remember saying that these manifold evils in the world were due to the fact that the majority of men had thrust Jesus Christ and his holy law out of their lives. Have thrust Jesus Christ and his holy law out of their lives. And not only out of their lives, but out of our governments, out of our constitutions, out of our Supreme Court laws, out of our public schools, out of our civil courts. That these, the laws of God, that these had no place either in private affairs or in politics. And we said further that as long as individuals and states refuse to submit to the rule of our Savior, there would be no really hopeful prospect of a lasting peace among nations. Men must look for the peace of Christ in the kingdom of Christ. The peace of Christ, Pax Christi, in Regno Christi, in the reign of Christ the King. Everyone wants, as Pope Pius X said, anybody, all of you know this great quote of Pope St. Pius X. He says, you cannot have a moral, let's start over. You cannot have a true civilization without a moral civilization. Okay? Everyone wants a true civilization, a healthy country. But he's saying you cannot have a true civilization without a moral civilization. And everyone wants a moral civilization. Everyone will love it if there's no stealing. Don't have to lock your doors. And people speak honestly. And when you sell products, that it's the actual product and not filled with fillers and cheapening the quality of what's sold in business. So everyone appreciates honesty, no lying, honesty in business, and security in your town or your suburb, where you're not being fearful of being broken in every night, right? Everyone loves a moral society. But here, St. Pius X, this is so important for us. But he says here, you cannot have a moral civilization. You cannot have a moral civilization without what, anyone? Without what? The true religion. You cannot have a true moral civilization without the true religion, which is, of course, the Holy Roman Catholic Church of tradition, not the Vatican II nonsense, not the conciliar counterfeit church, which we reject, which Archbishop Lefebvre rejected. And this is the quote, direct quote of Pope St. Pius X. So you need the true religion to have a moral civilization and to have a true civilization. It's impossible without the Catholic faith. So, the peace of Christ in the kingship of Christ. And that's the motto. So yes, as Catholics, we got to work for the heart of Jesus on our national flag. We have to work for the name of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church on the first sentence of our Constitution. And we should never be at rest until this is accomplished. And this is what it means, why we're confirmed to do battle for the reign of Christ the King. And we have to battle all the modern errors, and stand on the shoulders of all the great popes who condemned these errors, and stand on the shoulders of Archbishop Lefebvre, who stood opposed with Bishop de Castro-Mayor against this destruction of our Holy Catholic faith. And by fighting for the reign of Christ the King, you save your country. You save many, many people. You save all the morals. You save everything. And that's why our fight here is so important. And Archbishop Lefebvre, he understood the heart of rebuilding. Once the bombs have hit a city, to build again, you have to start with the Mass and the true doctrine. But the Mass and the true doctrine don't float in the air. You actually need a man to say the Mass. You need a man to preach from the pulpit the truth, and to forgive sins, and to baptize your babies, and anoint you dying. So the importance, as Archbishop Lefebvre said over and over and over again, the importance of seminaries. At the heart of the rebuilding is Catholic seminaries faithful to tradition. In the line and in the mind of Archbishop Lefebvre, and not the liberals like St. Peter's, who accept Vatican II and New Mass, and now the new SSPX. And I've got relatives in Winona. And these young priests, I know for a fact, these young priests out of Winona are coming out telling the youth groups, yeah, we have to get in with Rome. We have to get in under the Pope. That's what our catechism says. But what about Vatican II? What about the conciliar church? What about the apostasy from the top? They live in a dream world. And Archbishop Lefebvre, he understood this battle very clearly. That's why we have to stay in his direction and not deviate. Because his direction is totally built on the popes of tradition. And it's not our opinion, it's just handing down what we receive. Handing down what we receive. And that's on his tomb. Tradidi quoted acepi. I have handed down what I have received. This is all that Father Pfeiffer and all the priests of the resistance here in Our Lady of Mount Carmel is all we want to do. Not invent something, falling into errors of sedevacantism or errors of getting in with the modernist church, being recognized at the price of compromise. We got to just hold the line. And if all the bullets come after us and bombs start dropping, it doesn't matter. We hold the line. We die fighting. The peace of Christ in the reign of Jesus Christ. So I'll close there and we'll pick up another time. In the blood of the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary.
Saint Pius X, Saint John the Baptist, Saint Teresa, benedictio Dei omnipotentis Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti, nos vos in amen.